Welcome to the Ultimate Bloons TD6 strategy series, where I'm going to be showing you strategies for every single tower from the Dart Monkey to the Beast Handler and every single path in between. This will show you how to diversify your setup and get better, along with seeing some stats, tips and tricks, and all of the strategies for every single one of the towers. And although that the series is geared more towards Chimps mode, this will also show you a lot of tips and tricks that apply to the standard game and will allow you to win with a new style. So moving on to the last of the spike factors, we have the Perma spike, which is the bottom path coming with the deadly spikes and long life spikes. And there's a lot to talk about this. The Perma spike is kind of a classic tower. So long life spikes, unless you're Alec, you don't really use them. Deadly spikes is kind of just for the save up first Perma spike, and it all comes to the star, which is the Perma spike, late game cleanup, and Perma spike stall strategy. It's a very unique tower and is just the savior of a lot of stuff. So anyways, looking at the stats, the long life spikes and deadly spikes and perma spikes are all kind of like another extension of each other tower. They all do like relatively the same thing, but just better among each tier. But perma spike is really where it kicks up and it gets strong. Now deadly spikes is actually kind of a bit better than people might imagine, and we'll look at that, like the comparison of how big a deadly spike, long life spike, and perma spike stack does, and it's quite a big difference, and also just a little bit higher than you might imagine. Granted, it has an Alc buff. So let's take a look at the cross path. So for the cross path, I'm just go for 1/2OX, so just the top path. If you want to get the white hot spikes, you can. It doesn't add more damage, it allows it to pop DDTs, although you probably have an acidic mixture dip on it. Sometimes I just get the 205 instead of just the 105 in case there's like a desync or whatever, and it'll allow me to still pop the DDTs. But if you're going greedy, you can skip that out and save some money. Anyways, for the buffs, just a tier 3 Alc buff, Berserker Brew on all of them is going to be good. So now let's take a look at how much damage it does with a max pile. So for the long life spikes, it's 3.8k damage, which is actually a lot higher than I thought, which is very interesting because comparatively the deadly spikes at a max pile only does 5.1k, which isn't like a whole lot higher, but this is actually kind of a big amount, and when you have a few like random Moabs leaking, it can do a good amount of damage. Now let's take a look at a max buff perma spike pile, and it ends up doing about 100,000 damage if you have a maxed out perma spike pile. So somewhere around that with just an overclock and a Berserker Brew, which is the two buffs that you typically want to see giving this guy. And this is not enough to tank like all of round 98, it's not even close, but it can tank about a good amount of leakers. But this is granted that you have a max buff perma spike pile, which we'll talk about later. So now going on to where you want to place it, it's at the end of the track. Just get it at the end of the track. It's going to be doing very good cleanup there. You kind of are using it mostly as cleanup, but you also can take advantage of the smart targeting because you are going to be getting that for free as the tier 2 of the perma spike path. So on some maps where smart targeting would be useful, you can kind of use smart targeting and do that around, which is pretty cool. You also can kind of use it on multi-lane maps with Chinooking, which is an interesting thing, but for black borders, there's pretty much always going to be an easier strategy than that, unless you want to get really freaky with that. And when it comes to heroes, optimally, you don't want stuff that will ruin a stall, so like Sai, Etienne, Corvus, none of that. Instead, get something like Soda or maybe even Churchill, something that you can stall with so you can use that correctly. So the pros is it's extremely strong tier 5, can become way stronger with a bit of stalling, easy to put in any strategy, and it has like low and high skill options, which I'll mention later. The cons is that it can make games last forever if you're stalling. Its low skill doesn't really work on harder maps, the method of using it, and it has a kind of useless tier 3 and tier 4. So I'm going to be doing 2 example games. I did talk a little about this like low skill and high skill kind of use of perma spike, and that's really going to be the objectives: the perma spike low skill and high skill strategy, which will be involving stalling. So what I see a lot, it's very, very common, you'll probably see it a lot, you've probably done it many times, I've done this many times too, you just get a random strategy, literally can be whatever,
anything. In this case, I'm just gonna have like Spirit of the Forest, which is a cleanup tower, which is very odd to use like Perma-Spike, which is technically more so used as a cleanup tower with a cleanup tower, but that's just adding to the point. Literally just whatever, and put a Perma-Spike at the back of it. So whenever your strategy falls through and just stuff starts leaking through, the Perma-Spike will come and clean up whatever. Now this is technically like not really close to being optimal. It's not good in like money wise, like spending wise, as part of like a strategy wise thing, but it's just something that it works because it is Perma-Spike, and if there's stuff leaking through, it's gonna grab whatever at the end and stop it from leaking. So it is something that I guess you can do. However, I do see a lot of people rely on this a lot, and when they go onto harder maps, it just doesn't work. Like the stuff will start leaking because their strategy is bad and they have a huge 40,000 cash sink from buying Perma-Spike, and on some harder maps this just doesn't really work out that well. So a lot of times you will see this just work totally fine on beginner, intermediate maps, even some of maybe the more easier advanced maps, but a lot of times you'll just see examples of people just throwing in Perma-Spike with some random tower, and it just doesn't end up working out. And because there really is no stall, the max Perma-Spike tile has is more like around 30,000 RBE, which isn't really a lot, and just a few ZMGs, a handful of BFBs will just go straight through that like it's nothing. So this isn't going to be the most effective thing later on, and if you want to use Perma-Spike effectively, you're going to have to do a whole bunch more stuff, and doing some stalling, putting in some heroes that won't kill the stall, all kind of that stuff, and just getting a lot of the right towers. So we'll be taking a look at that later on. But as for now, this is something that will just work out in pretty much everything. You just throw down Perma-Spike. Now, one thing that you could do to kind of advance it more is Perma-Spike is a lot better at taking out like DDTs, because DDTs have low RBE. It's just going to be based on what like the RBE that comes in. So a bunch of DDTs, Perma-Spike will have no problem with that. So if you have a strategy that is kind of weaker to DDTs, you could have a Perma-Spike take some stuff, but especially DDTs will just go in there and it's not a problem. So you, I guess, won't really have to focus so much on the DDTs if you're using Perma-Spike to just kind of eat pretty much all of them even. Another thing is around 100. A lot of times if you're just tanking the whole bad, it won't be able to get it. 100k RBE is enough to tank the whole bad, but that's if you have a full Perma-Spike pile, and you're likely not, even if you are stalling, going to get a stall against around 99 unless you're like doing some super advanced stuff. So just like the typical kind of stall, like maybe just main Moab, a bunch of Moab presses, which I'll be showing in the example later, wouldn't really be able to just tank all around 100. It will be able to get a good chunk of it, but not all of it. So keep that in mind generally, although a lot of times you'll have a good amount of spikes to tank, like DDTs, maybe even all like those ZMGs that come in, but not everything else. So that, just keep that in mind. It's easier to just very easily stall out those like bigger, heavier rounds, so that's something that you'll see later. But another thing is that the Perma-Spike can be used on multi-lane maps. Sometimes you can just have smart targeting, like target in between the two, or like do manually close to far, which is something that you have control over, because sometimes smart targeting can literally just go in wonky directions. It's based on how close a balloon is, kind of more so, and if the paths are different lengths, it can be deceiving which one is actually targeted. So a lot of times if you're doing that, unless you're really good with manually migrating it between close and far, it will just get out of balance, and one side has a ton of spikes, the other side doesn't, and it just isn't that good after that. So on multi-lane maps it can be a little bit tricky. I did mention Chinook before. That's something that you also can do, and Chinook I guess is pretty nice because when the Moabs come in, it can blow back the ceramics and really cut a lot of RBE. So it's not like a bad option, it's just that it's going to be very annoying because you won't be really constantly be building onto one big pile. You're going to have several piles all over the place, and spikes will generally get wasted. So it's another kind of advanced thing. It isn't really going to be all that crazy effective, and you probably aren't going to be able to pull it off for black borders and kind of stuff. So typically with Perma-Spike, I just recommend keeping it alone to one lane, and then everything will be good and all. And also when it comes to buffs, you could do, I guess, more than overclock. I mentioned this in the Lord of the Abyss video, but a lot of people are always just like saying Lord of the Abyss Perma-Spike. I don't really find that very good, because you're using Lord of the Abyss just for Pierce, which I really only recommend using it if you're going to be taking advantage of the Pierce and the cleanup kind of at the same time. And as the Permaspike is already doing cleanup, you're paying a lot of money just to get a bit of extra Pierce, which that money could be used in a significantly better manner of kind of just stalling out or cutting RBE in the first place. So it's not like it's a crazy thing. When you're using Lord of the Abyss, you definitely want to use it if you're going to be taking both of the advantage of the Pierce and the cleanup and the Moab slow there, because it's going to be way in the back of the track. It's not really going to be cleaning up much of anything. It's not going to be slowing down anything. It's just going to be giving a very expensive buff. So I generally don't really recommend it. You can do it, I guess, on some certain maps where you kind of can align stuff up so you can take advantage of the Lord of the Abyss and still have the Permaspike throwing in the back of the track. But most of the time, I just recommend not really doing it. But it's a thing that a lot of people are talking about. I just don't really get the hype of it that much. So anyways, moving on, we have the next example. I've got Sada here, and we're just going to be outbuffing Sada on Workshop, and we're going to be getting a Permaspike at the end. Permaspike is a great way to cheese this map on Chimps mode. It will just tank everything that's coming in and around. So we're going to get that, and we're going to get deadly spikes early, which is kind of an interesting thing to do, but with a good hero you actually kind of can pull it off fairly easily. And then I'm just going to be trying to get a Permaspike fairly early on. I'll be getting a few towers to kind of help that. On this map, there isn't really like many towers that will be able to do a good amount of mid-game damage. I guess aces would, the ace and never miss ace, or even Spectre, I guess, would be great with that, but that would kill the stall that we're going to want to do. So we're going to be trying, I'm not doing anything like super advanced here. You can do stuff with Bird to really get a long stall. May Moab is really easy and actually kind of effective because you just set it on last for rounds with the ZOMGs, and it'll keep the ZOMG way at the end. And then on DDT rounds, you can set that main Moab back to strong, and will take out DDTs a bit easier. Like Permaspike would just take out the DDTs, but it will do pretty well. Round 97, you get a great stall for 98, so you're going to be getting like a full spike factory pile there. So that's really good. Unfortunately, on this map, like all my towers, because I bought the wizard right there, it would be hitting kind of where stalled ZOMG would be. So that was kind of my mistake. I should have looked for another tower to use in the save up, so then I could have really done a main Moab stall, because that's good. You'll see that a lot more, but instead I decided just to go over to something which is also pretty effective, which is just spamming a bunch of Moab presses, get an unstable concoction, and then like a relentless glue in there. And with Sada, or just like any kind of damage hero, not a little bit of damage, it necessarily doesn't have to be like a tower. You can really just cut a lot of RBE and keep things pushed away back long enough that Permaspike will be able to build up and maintain enough spikes to tank everything, and it works out pretty well. So I'm just going to get in the mid game this arcane spike, which will be able to kill all these Moabs. We'll have a dinosaur there, a velociraptor, and a condor too. Condor is also another great thing that you can use to push BFBs back. So instead of just leaking straight through, the Condor can come and push some BFBs back. This is without the bug. With the bug, you can do some crazy stuff with Permaspike too and that. So that's all going to be very, very effective. And with this in the mid game, all these towers, well, I guess besides maybe the arcane spike, it's going to be doing a little bit in the late game, but that Condor is going to be doing a lot in the late game, and it will also help me save up for the Permaspike. So I'm going to get that Permaspike, and then from there we're just going to be chilling until like the 90s start. You really don't have to worry about your stalls too much, because the Permaspike is just going to take everything. From here I'm just going to grab that village and overclock, but until round 90 you don't really have to worry about much. But then once round 90 comes in, you kind of need to get that stall, because a lot of these rounds are like ending very quickly, and it's either the 300, I think it's 300 seconds, or 3 rounds. And if the rounds are ending quickly, your spikes are literally just all going to disappear. So you're going to want to watch out for that even sooner than later, like on round 97 maybe even. So you don't want to kind of get caught off guard with that, but it's definitely time to get that overclock. We got that now. I accidentally almost bought a balloon trap down there at the bottom. If you might have noticed, I just hit the wrong hotkey there, so don't make that mistake. But we're going to be getting all these mob presses up now. They're going to be pushing the ZOMGs, BFBs back, and then with an unstable concoction we'll be able to just deal a lot of damage, and a lot of pressure is going to be taken off Permaspike. So before, in the examples of where we just have Permaspike throw down in a random strategy, you might get like 40k pops on your Permaspike, which is kind of showing that you really aren't getting good value out of it for like how much money you spent on it. But here we might see like 300k, 400k, maybe even 500k, which is pretty good. But it's good to like keep the pops away from the Permaspike so you don't get like a low pile. That's kind of around where you want to get, but instead have all that damage be done on like that unstable concoction, Soda, all of these small presses constantly pushing things back. I can use all of these like buttons on workshop here to help out too, and some abilities, and with that we just keep the rounds paced out longer, and we can get some spikes and all to be able to beat the later rounds. So that's the Permaspike. It's a really classic tower.
Thanks for watching. If you want to help out the channel, you can check out these new videos, like and subscribe for more content, support the channel by becoming a member, and joining the Discord to chat with the community. Bye!